Hi, I'm Kat, I play Sims, and I built my next house on the street for Occults, which is for a ghost. I wanted a slightly different shape for this one again, so I took a little bit of the top floor off and turned it into split level. I messed around with the roof for quite a long time, but cut a lot of it out because it ended up being just basic triangles anyway. I decided to add some damage to the roof with the items from Life and Death. I didn't really like the way they looked because they didn't match the colour, but it was the best I could do. I put up a weather vane and a chimney, and then I went on the outside of the house. Originally I went with a grey brick from Life and Death, but I ended up changing that, and I've got a Life and Death door at the front and the back. This pack carries heavily in the build as well as paranormal stuff. I was basically going for a black and grey colour scheme. I put in a few windows on all of the sides and the back for the moment, and then I sort of changed them as I needed to as I did the build. I decided the house would look better on a little foundation, so I put that in with the brick foundation from Life and Death and matching stairs and rails at the back and the front from the same pack. I did the yard area at the back and the side with the Life and Death fencing, and I left it without a gate at the front originally. I added a debug item afterwards, but for the moment I was leaving it open, and I started working on the floor plan. I knew I wanted a grand staircase, which I had to move a couple of times to put it in the right place upstairs. The idea was to have a lofted bedroom upstairs, which I used the Life and Death fencing for. It does match up with the front door in the end, but at first it did look a little bit strange. I put the bathroom downstairs and I scooted the windows about so that they didn't look straight into it, and then I sectioned off the rooms downstairs because I didn't want it to be too open plan. Somehow, even though I took off a chunk of the building, this house has some massive rooms in it. I used Life and Death doors everywhere through the house. For the next bit, I decided to go outside. I briefly thought I might be able to put some bars on the windows. None of the items I tried would actually fit, so I decided to move on to a little bit of landscaping, and I used this hedge in the red swatch that I didn't realise before now that I had. I added a little bit of ivy and a planter box, but I couldn't make any more ivy sit naturally on the building. The shapes are just not right. I put in a couple of debug trees, although I changed the one at the front because it didn't look very natural at all. And I added a few debug items like some planters and a gate, which Sims won't be able to pass through, I don't think, but there is a door to the backyard anyway. And I put some of these candle planters and then a shrub from Enchanted by Nature. I added some more of those red hedges around the sides and back of the house, and then I went inside and started doing the lighting. I used candle chandeliers that actually come from Get Together, and they give off a really nice warm light. I wound up using a black Get Together tile in the bathroom as well, and then the spooky stuff pack flooring for the rest of the house. I used a paranormal wallpaper in the little office zone, and then I went back outside and decided to change the walls out here. There's a Tudor style wallpaper from Get Together as well, so I just put that everywhere. I made a couple of little differences here and there so it wasn't so solid. And I decided to go inside and do the wallpapers, which were basically all from Life and Death except the base game tile in the bathroom, which was a plain black. I realised as I was doing this that something must have been open to the outside and the Tudor wall was carrying over to inside, but I couldn't really be bothered to fix it, so I just let it be and added columns to make it all blend in. I moved on to the bathroom downstairs and I put in a base game tub in a sort of grey and white. I added the cats and dogs toilet that I use quite a lot, and then a high school years sink because it was quite black and plain. The mirror was from Get Together as well, and I used Tool to move that around, and then I added some shelves and a little unit from For Rent, as well as the sleek bathroom shelving on the wall. I wanted some clutter in here, so I put the usual bits in, and then I wanted something a little bit stranger on the shelves behind the toilet. I couldn't find the urn that I wanted, but I put up a little head sculpture from Modern Looks, a tray from Sleek Bathroom, a little picture frame from Paranormal, and a Crystal Creations jewellery display as well, but I had to size that down. Not much slotted on these shelves, to be honest. I had to use smaller items, and then I just put some black candles everywhere around. I added a little ghost in a jar from Life and Death and a plant that was actually from Spa Day that looked kind of dead and fit the theme. I added a Life and Death picture of the Grim Reaper on the wall and then just a towel as well. It is above the candles, so not ideal in real life, but fine in The Sims. I decided to tackle the kitchen dining room next, so I actually only put base game, fridge and stove in because they were in a nice black and gold colour. And then I used the life and death counters, which were black and gold as well and kind of marbly. I raised the windows a little bit to fit behind the counters better, and then I added an island with chairs from Discover University, which worked quite well with it. I put in a sink that's also base game but fit the colour scheme, and I added a for rent shelf by the hood, but I had to downsize it a little bit. While I was looking for shelves, I found the funeral item from Life and Death, so I put that out in the hallway and I made sure the wallpaper carried over the stairs, and then I went back into the kitchen and got these sort of free hanging shelves from Life and Death and put a couple bits of clutter on there. I was adding a lot of wine themed items, I'm not entirely sure why, but I had this vision in my head, so I added a bar in the back corner with a bar back from Life and Death, and some of the nectar racks in the corner from Horse Ranch. The bar itself was actually just base game, but it fit nicely with the back. I did turn the grid on to make sure the Sims could get around it. And then I went looking for a dining table, which actually ended up coming from the Spooky Stuff pack. The chairs were from a reward event, I think the one around Enchanted by Nature, but I'm not sure. And then I put black seasons curtains up, and I started adding cobwebs to the walls and some cracks and damage, all from vampires, because I thought with this being a ghost house it wouldn't be that well kept. They do still have needs, just like other Sims, but it didn't want to look super clean and normal, so I just put cracks and marks and cobwebs everywhere that I wanted, and I did carry it over in the rest of the house when I was done. I put a sort of old-timey photo up, and then I used a storybook nursery rug and sized it to fit with the table. And then I actually put a vintage glamour rug in the kitchen as a sort of bath mat in front of the sink. I went out in the hallway and added a cracked mirror from the Basement Treasures kit, and then I ended up putting some pictures up from the Spooky Stuff pack and a comfy gamer rug as well, and a cozy kitsch one in front of the door. I swapped out the display for the pre-decorated one, and then I went to try and put something in the corner by the door and ended up settling on a rocking chair from Storybook Nursery. I moved into the office and I put in the Crystal Creations bookshelves with the ladder on one and the plain one on the other one. I added a Life and Death desk and a career unlock chair with it, and I just put the journal on there and another one of the funeral pictures. I decided to fill in the gaps in the bookshelves, so I added a lot of clutter, including extra books. I had quite a few different bits in here. I decided to put the quill item in and another ghost in a jar. I used a nappy bag item from the Storybook Nursery kit and just spun it around to look a little bit different. I put in the little paranormal cow plant terrarium thing and just moved it with tools so that it wasn't floating. And I moved stuff around so that it slotted better to the bookshelf. I added a haunted house picture from Paranormal Stuff to the back wall and some matching paranormal curtains. And to no surprise at all, I used the rug from Life and Death in here. It had a lot of brown and gold on it, but it matched the beading on the curtains. And then I put a cats and dogs photo and a plant in the corner from Laundry Day. I moved out into the other open area, which I was using as a sort of living space. I put in a Discover University fireplace and then an industrial loft sofa. At first I added a Lovestruck table and a frame TV from Secret Sanctuary, but I decided that it didn't really fit the theme of the house, so I replaced everything with a pipe organ from Vampires. I tried shuffling everything around to see if I could keep anything of it, but in the end I just got rid of all of that stuff and used a career unlock chair in the corner. I used these Realm of Magic runner rugs. I did a strange mix of them and I sized them up with tulle to make them fit the space better, but it was a little bit uneven in the end. I added a vase of flowers to the top of the fireplace, and then I put in the bonsai trees just so that there's some skill building out here, and a little mirror and some items from Secret Sanctuary again on the walls. I started adding the rest of the cracks and damage down here at this point. So I put in some Life and Death scuff marks and then all of the cracks from Vampires again. I did forget to put any in the office, so that's a little bit clean looking compared to the rest. And then I decided to go up and do the bedroom, which I started off with Life and Death bed and the dressers from the same pack as well. There's some really nice wall candles in wedding stories that I put up above the dressers, and I did get to use the fireplace from Life and Death, but I had to size it down because it always clips through roofs and ceilings. I added a chest table with Life and Death chairs, and then I used that same vintage glamour rug again up here and sized it up to fit, and a Life and Death sofa as well. I decided the rug was a little bit plain, so I used a black one from Paranormal Kit instead that I think looked better. I added clutter to the dressers by the table, including the comfy gamer book, and I put the cracks in the walls as well. I did quite a lot on the walls up here, and then I put in a music box and some bottles next to the bed. There's an urn that I couldn't find before but did at this point, and I put in a trunk from Life and Death as well. I tried to add in an hourglass on the fireplace, but because I'd sized it down it didn't slot right, so that ended up on the dresser. I put up a Life and Death family portrait and one of the wreaths from the funeral events in the corner as well. There was a little plaque from the pack, and I put in the decorative curtains behind the bed. And then with that, I decided to go into the yard. I wanted to put a crypt in, so I put that and got rid of the hedges that were clipping into it. And I added a little bench out by the tree as well. I decided it needed some terrain paint, so I put a sort of black rock texture around the front door, and then I filled in the entire yard with it. As the last touch, I added the dirt paint underneath all the plants and around the edges, and with that I was done, so enjoy the screenshots. Please consider a like and subscribe.